Welcome to the Book Dragon podcast. Today I'm going to be doing another book review of Wuthering Heights because I've decided that I would like to read a certain number of classic books in the next near future, and I had a lot of thoughts about this one and decided I may as well just do reviews for a bunch of other classic books that I'm going to read. I originally decided to read Wuthering Heights because I had read a biography about the three Bronte sisters, Charlotte, Anne, and Emily, and all of the books that they had written sounded interesting to me, so I decided to read all of them. Wuthering Heights was the first, and yeah, I found it very interesting and had a lot of thoughts on it. So, Emily Bronte lived on the moors, and she loved to run and play there and just be by herself with her dog. And that really bled into Wuthering Heights, and especially Catherine Earnshaw. So I am going to start off with giving you a good idea of the plot, which something I have here is going to help me with in a book I listened to called The Labors of Hercules Beale. At one point in the story, his friend is reading Wuthering Heights and she thinks it's ethereal, and Hercules wonders how any book can be ethereal that you have to use a family chart to figure out. So, I made a family chart. It's not the prettiest thing ever, but it was rather fun to make it, and I think it'll help me explain the story a little bit. So, we start out with Mr. and Mrs. Earnshaw. They had two children, Catherine and Hindley. One day, Mr. Earnshaw comes home with a boy he found and he would like to adopt, and his name is Heathcliff. So all three of these children grow up together, and Mr. Earnshaw shows special care to Heathcliff, and Hindley doesn't like that. And Catherine and Heathcliff play together a lot, and they really like each other. Mr. and Mrs. Earnshaw die, and then Hindley goes, and he gets married, and he doesn't treat Catherine and Heathcliff very well, because he especially doesn't like Heathcliff. At one point in the story, Catherine meets the Lintons, which consists of Mr. and Mrs. Linton, and Edgar and Isabel Linton. And she starts to, more like Edgar starts to like Catherine. And they eventually get married, which makes Heathcliff very angry, and so he runs off. And so they get married, and a long time after, quite a few years, Francis dies, Heathcliff comes back. And he's a gentleman by this time. Somehow he acquired a fortune, and he's staying at Wuthering Heights, and is trying to get his revenge on Hindley that way. And so Heathcliff and Catherine hang out a little bit to reconnect, sort of. And Isabel, this Edgar's sister, starts to get a crush on Heathcliff. And Heathcliff uses that in a very bad way, and he marries her, not because he likes her, but more so to get his revenge on Edgar for marrying Catherine. While later Catherine dies and Heathcliff is very much grieved, there's a lot of time in this book that passes. It's quite a few years. And eventually Isabel leaves Heathcliff when she has a good reason. And she has a son after she leaves. And also, the day Catherine dies, she has a daughter named Catherine as well, but they call her Kathy. And also Francis and Hindley had a son named Hareton. So these are 3 new characters mainly. Heathcliff is working on his revenge on Hindley, and eventually Hindley dies, and Heathcliff takes control of Wuthering Heights because he had given a lot of money to Hindley, mostly so he could take possession of Wuthering Heights. So Heathcliff's living at Wuthering Heights, and Edgar and Kathy are living at Thrushcross Grange, and also Hareton is living at Wuthering Heights. And at one point, Isabel dies and sends her son to Edgar for him to take care of, but Heathcliff finds out and makes them take him to his house because he's his son and he has plans. One day, Kathy ends up at Wuthering Heights and meets both Linton and Hareton, and eventually, through a whole course of events, Heathcliff actually forces Kathy to marry Linton, which puts Thrushcross Grange into Heathcliff's possession, which finalizes his revenge against Edgar, even though by this time, Edgar's dying. So, eventually, Edgar dies. Catherine lives at Wuthering Heights with Linton and Heathcliff and Hareton, but Linton is a very sickly boy, and he dies very quickly. And at the end, Kathy and Hareton start to grow closer, and eventually Heathcliff dies, and Catherine and Hareton get married. Well, they're going to get married by the end of the book. So, that is a very general plot line. A lot of stuff happened, and a lot of bad stuff, and good stuff, and yeah, a lot of stuff happened. So, some things I didn't like. Heathcliff, for one, we're not really supposed to like him very much, I guess. I mean, we're kind of supposed to, but also kind of not. He's honestly not a very good person, and he is very obsessed with revenge, and he's honestly a little bit dramatic. I mean, I think that's somewhat the point of the book, just like the strength of emotions. And yeah, so Heathcliff, emotions go all over the place with that character. There's a lot of language, which, I mean, it kind of fits the characters. So the way this story was told is very interesting. It was told in the diary of this random guy named Mr. Lockwood, who had come to be a tenant at Thrushcross Grange, and the housekeeper, Ellen, tells him this whole story of Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering Heights. And so that's how we learn the story. It's a very weird way, but there's also, like, things in between with Mr. Lockwood going to visit Mr. Heathcliff, and Mr. Lockwood leaves at one point and comes back and hears the rest of the story. It's a very strange way of telling the story. And yeah, Mr. Lockwood wasn't my favorite character. He was very random. But also, like, I don't know. He didn't seem to be very sympathetic towards the people living there. Yeah. The book was kind of depressing because everybody was, like, trying to get revenge on everybody, and nobody really changed. Like, they didn't change how they felt about other people, or, yeah. That was one thing I noticed. Also, the whole deal with Kathy and Linton, that was upsetting, somewhat. I liked the character of Ellen. She was probably my favorite character. Even though she was just the narrator and the housekeeper, she was involved in almost everything that happened and was there the whole time and could really present a objective view, I suppose, of the whole deal. And she had also raised both Hareton and Kathy. And she had been grown up with Heathcliff and Hindley and Catherine. So she pretty much knew everybody. I also liked the ending. I felt like Kathy and Harrington getting married was a good end. I wasn't expecting it to be happy. I was expecting it to be just like really depressing at the end. And it turned out that Kathy and Harrington actually liked each other and were willing to change the course of their family's bitterness and revenge over the years. So I really liked that. There were a couple things I found interesting. Like Edgar versus Heathcliff. So right away, we feel like we're supposed to like Heathcliff, obviously, because he likes Catherine and they grew up together, and they both love each other, but Kathy doesn't marry him because she thinks that he's too low for her to marry. So, but then he gets all mad and he gets very revengeful, and he's not a great person, but we still kind of have this background of like for him because of the past. And then Edgar, right away, we feel like we're not supposed to like him because he marries Catherine even though she likes Heathcliff. But by the end of the book, he's one of the most moral, best characters, which is very confusing and interesting. Anyway, so those are some of my thoughts on the Wuthering Heights. I somewhat enjoyed the book, also somewhat was depressed by it, but it was very much like a thinking book. It made me think pretty hard. There was also some really good quotes that I would like to read. So, one of them is, "He's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same." That was Catherine talking about Heathcliff, right before she decided not to marry him. And this next quote was something she said the day she died, and she was wanting to be out on the moors, but she was too sick to go. And I felt like it was a really good quote and related to other things that were similar. She said, "I'm wearying to escape into that glorious world, to be always there, not seeing it dimly through tears and yearning for it through the walls of an aching heart, but really with it and in it." And the last quote, I don't remember what part it's from or who said it. It might have just been in the narration, but I thought it pretty much summed up the book well. "Treachery and violence are spears pointed at both ends. They wound those who resort to them worse than their enemies." So, that was Wuthering Heights. Next, I'm going to be reading Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte, and I'm pretty excited about that one. It sounds more my style than Wuthering Heights was. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this review, and come back next time.